I'm Melody Hull. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I am on the Madison County Cemetery Commission. We are the commission that takes care of the over 90 abandoned pioneer cemeteries in our county. And that's how I got into Revolutionary War veterans. I'm also, of course, on the Board of Trustees for the Madison County Historical Society, right here. And let me say before we go on that none of the information on these soldiers is my research. I have compiled the research of others, primarily that of Raymond Davis. If any of you are familiar with that name, then you probably know that he was one of the county's more prolific historians and writers in mid-20th century. He used the records from the Adjutant General, the American Legion, and the research of Margaret Waters, who published multiple books on Revolutionary War veterans buried in Indiana. Additional data has been gleaned from history books and articles from historical newspapers. Most of the pictures are mine. Indiana has over 2,000 Revolutionary War veterans buried inside its boundaries. I was surprised at that number. Years ago, I didn't know we had any. You know, I wasn't a history major. I had the Revolution with its 13 colonies compartmentalized back along the East Coast. That's where everybody lived. That's where all the action was. You know, that's where they fought. That's where they died. Well, not all, but most of it. So that's why I was shocked out of comment many summers ago when I discovered the grave marker for Revolutionary War veteran Henry Russell, who is buried at the Otterbein Cemetery in Chesterfield. Actually, I blame all of this on Richard Dilts. Richard is my great-great-great-grandfather, and I had gotten into my family's genealogy and was searching for his gravestone at the Otterbein when I ran into Henry Russell's grave marker. Henry's plaque said that he was a Revolutionary War veteran. I stood there transfixed. How did Henry get here? Why doesn't he have a memorial, a big Indiana historical marker of some kind? So let's start with Henry Russell at the Otterbein Cemetery, since that's where I started. The Otterbein is between a little street in Chesterfield called Industrial Way and the Anderson Airport fence. Some of the original trees are there, and the township trustee takes care of it. I feel like I know Henry. I've used him so many times in presentations and articles. He is one of 14 Revolutionary vets buried inside of Madison County, according to Davis and others. Henry Russell was at Valley Forge, 1777. He was born in 1754, served as a private in Maryland's 1st Regiment. He died in 1836 here on the Hoosier frontier. He was 82 years old. And according to family stories, he still had coal black hair and could stand proudly tall and erect. Henry is listed in the DAR Index of Revolutionary Patriots. Mr. Russell had to have been one of the earliest pioneers to Union Township. There's a second Revolutionary veteran buried at the Otterbein, according to the Adjutant General and the American Legion's Atlas of Cemeteries and Records of Deceased Veterans. The grave of Captain Litchfield is listed as unmarked in the Otterbein Cemetery area. It is possibly in the adjacent Potter's Field on the west side of the airport boundary fence. In this picture, if you look into the distance beyond those trees, you see that tall gray fence and the posts that had just been erected. Potter's Field, which is the name for the graveyard for the burial of the indigent, the very poor. Potter's Field is on the other side of that fence. In order to get to it, you have to go through the airport office. They have to give you permission to walk out there because it is so close to a landing strip. But Captain Litchfield may be buried out there. He had to have been one of the first settlers again to Union Township. We don't know anything about him. We don't know when he was born. We don't know when he died. He probably was from Maryland and probably entered Union Township along with other settlers from the Maryland area. We have a name at the Adjutant General. That's it, Captain Litchfield. How did Henry Russell, Captain Litchfield, and the other Revolutionary soldiers get to Indiana? Why are any of them buried here? Most of it happened way back on the East Coast. Well, after the Revolutionary War, the U.S. government couldn't pay its veteran soldiers, so instead of money, the government offered unsettled land. The Northwest Territory, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, were being settled the first several decades after the war. It was being pioneered east to west, and the government was purchasing it slowly in pieces from Native Americans. In 1818, the U.S. government obtained from the Delaware tribe the area called the New Purchase. That's where we live now, in the shaded area on that map. The lined section there. Madison County would be above the H in Purchase. So as older men, grandfathers often, Revolutionary vets took their land claims, traveled with their families of multiple generations from Ohio, North Carolina, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and set up homesteads along the waterways. And this is what they had to face. There's White River. The Delaware called it Wapahane. And you see the villages on the south bank. Way on the right there is Muncie Town. Coming more to the left, you see Wapaminskink. That's Anderson. That's what the Delaware, the Lenni Lenape called it. Chestnut Tree Place. On further to the left or west, you have Straws Town. Okay. And then after the bend, you come down to William Connor Settlement, 1802. Of course, that would be Connor Prairie. And then on into Indianapolis. That's what they faced, a forested wilderness populated by the Delaware villages. And because most of the water, especially Fall Creek, from the White River on down south, that section of the county was settled first. Because Fall Creek particularly was the first to have a lot of people, because what did Fall Creek have? It had the falls. And falls back in the early 1800s meant power. You could build a huge wooden wheel. And the wooden wheel had paddles on it. And you place it in the water against the falling water, and the falling water would turn the wheel. And the wheel would be connected to wooden gears, and the gears would be connected to grinding stones. And those grinding stones turned hard grain into flour. And with other kinds of gears, it turned timber into lumber. So, besides water, you had the two most important things for survival: food and shelter. And that's why the falls at Fall Creek was settled first. Let me show you. I've given you a few of the earliest settlers into Madison County. David Hillis was the surveyor, and he was supposed to start in 1821, and before he could even start, this place began to be almost flooded with white settlers, especially in the south. You had John Rogers. They signed the treaty in the fall of 1818, I think, and in December of 1818, John Rogers was setting walls. That's how quickly they came in. The ink on that treaty wasn't dry yet, and they started coming in. I'm being figuratively, of course. William Dilts may have been in Chesterfield as early as 1819. Benjamin Fisher and his family, large family, came along Stony Creek in 1820, as well as Jacob Heide in the same year, Lick Creek. This is a map developed for one of the articles I wrote for the Herald Bulletin a number of years ago on the Revolutionary veterans. There is one that is missing. He's not on any cemetery that we know of, and we have a general location for where he is buried, almost next to the boundary line between Madison County and Hancock County. That's Andrew Jackson. We get to him next. But you can see that of the 14, 7 of them are in Fall Creek Township. That's how popular, how important it was. Of the 7 of the 14 in the county, 1, Andrew Jackson, is not in any recognizable cemetery. We just have a general location. 6 have nothing in the cemetery where we think they are buried. 3 have DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, DAR memorial plaques. 3 of them have it. 2 have original stones at their original burial sites, but the stones are broken. 1 has an unbroken stone, and it's quite legible, but we're not sure where he was buried in the cemetery, so he is set with his family in a cemetery trough. And only 1 has an unbroken stone at his original burial site, unbroken and extremely legible. Only 1 of the 14. We've already covered on the right-hand side the Otterbein in Union Township, and of course Chesterfield is right on the the White River. So let's look at Fall Creek Township next, where we have 7. We'll come back to that map. Andrew Jackson and his wife Elizabeth. And I have to single him out because he is the one who isn't on the map. He is the one who isn't buried at any recognizable cemetery. He's buried in a family plot that has been destroyed and forgotten about. In mid-20th century, we knew where that plot was. Andrew and Elizabeth actually had stones existing at that time there in the family plot. They no longer exist, the gravestones, and the exact location of the graves is not on record anywhere. Of course, pioneers were self-sufficient. When someone died, the family took care of the burial, and usually the burial location was on the property, high ground, and away from the living. We know from Davis's research that Andrew Jackson's grave and that of his wife's were located on the south bank of Lick Creek, somewhere south of County Road 1000 South. That's where that picture was taken. Since Andrew owned land in Fall Creek Township Section 3, we started there, and that would be just north of the Hancock County boundary line. So Andrew and his wife are the southernmost of those buried in the county. And additionally, we don't know how many other family members or even relatives or neighbors are buried at that forgotten private graveyard. Andrew Jackson was born between 1742 and 1750 in North Carolina and died in 1847, so he would have been around 100 years old. Andrew's military service is recorded in the DAR Index of Revolutionary Patriots, and that's where some of the problem comes, Because if you've done genealogy for any length of time, you know Andrew Jackson, there wasn't just one. I think at one time I counted it was either 5 or 6 Andrew Jacksons involved in the Revolution. One of them is buried in southern Indiana. Another one, according to local research, is buried here in Madison County. Okay? After the war, he eventually located in Wayne County, Indiana. He moved from there and in 1828 purchased the northeast quarter of Section 3. In 1829, he purchased more land that would eventually be part of Greene Township in Hancock County. So, both counties claim him as a settler. He and his wife, Elizabeth, had 11 children. 11. Stephen, Henry, Lucinda, Dempsey, William, Mary, Andrew, Levi, Elizabeth, Phoebe, and Whitlock.
What was the last one?
Whitlock.
Whitlock.
Yeah, Whitlock. Mm-hmm. Andrew Jackson was honored posthumously when his biography appeared in the June 23, 1849 edition of the Pendleton News. I've seen a copy of that article. It lists him as, it says he was a Revolutionary veteran. He is also discussed as a Revolutionary vet in one of the earliest history books for Hancock County. If we go a little further north in the county, still south of Pendleton, right along State Road 9, we have the Minden Cemetery. The oldest stones are from this picture in the far background in that line of trees on the left. I think the Minden has more stones from the 1830s and 40s than any of our other pioneer cemeteries. They're all over the place along that back section. And if you want to see John Mingle's DAR plaque, don't make the same mistake I did the first time I went searching for it. I looked for him among his peers. I was looking for him along that line of trees with his generation. And he may have been buried there with them, but his memorial is not there in that section. It's more toward the middle of the cemetery. And this is what the DAR does when they don't know where a patriot is actually buried. They will select a proven descendant's stone. The pillar, I think, is for his son John, and John's wife is the pillar on the right. You'll see this flat cement foundation stone to the left of John's pillar, and on top is a memorial DAR plaque. So it's flush with the ground, and you may have to trip over it before you find it, but it's more in the middle, and it's beside his son, and that's how the DAR does that. And that's what it looks like. It's about this big, square. It's a nice size. John Mingle is listed in the DAR Index of Patriots. He was born in 1758, fought with the Pennsylvania regiments. He came to the southern part of Madison County along Lick Creek, near Minden. With his family in the 1820s, he built a homestead there. His children were George, Elizabeth, Louis, John, and David. He died in 1842 at 84 years of age. While he may have been a reverend, other researchers have him listed as a blacksmith, and he could have been both. And just to keep things interesting, he, or a relative, also named John, owned one of the first taverns in Pendleton. So he may have been a multi-dimensional man, you know. Moving a little further north and to the west, across from Pendleton, we come to the Crosley Cemetery. Samuel Pavey is located in this pioneer cemetery, and he's in a beautiful spot. The Crosley is on a hill north of Reformatory Road that runs along the north bank of Fall Creek. It's west of the Reformatory itself. It's back a lane along a farmer's field, and you got to know which field and which lane, because you really can't see the cemetery from the road. I took this picture to illustrate, if you want to find the Crosley, you have to be driving on Reformatory Road and you have to be headed east. Okay, heading east. And the cemetery will appear, if you look real quick, up on the hill to your left, and those white stones against those trees stand out for a couple of seconds. This cemetery was in shambles in the early 1970s, and it's one of the first projects tackled by the Cemetery Commission once it was instituted in late 1973. The cemetery had been part of a cow pasture, unfenced. The stones were knocked down, broken, partially buried. And when we don't know where to reset the individual stones because they're in a pile, and we don't know which grave site is whose, we do this. We dig a trench of cement, and we place the stones in family groups. The tall pillar on the left is for Conrad Crosley, and these are his markers for his wife and all of his children and any of his relatives. And Samuel is reset, his stone is reset in that line. He's the one who has a stone that is complete, but we don't know exactly where in the cemetery his grave is located. And he has a very excellent stone, doesn't he? It is intact. It is legible. He was born in Accomack County, Virginia, 1763, fought for the Virginia militia. After the war, he can be found on the records for Kentucky and Ohio before moving to Wayne County and later Fayette County, Indiana. He put down roots in Fall Creek Township. Samuel and his wife, Hethy, H-E-T-H-Y, Hethy, had 9 children. While Hethy died in 1838, she also has a stone here, by the way. Samuel lived to be 88 years old and died in 1851. He applied for his pension in 1835 when he was 72. He was denied his pension because the record said that Samuel Pavey deserted. His contention at the time was that there were 2 Samuel Paveys, not uncommon. Regiment members coming from the same area, same family. The second, the other Samuel Pavey, was the young fifer boy. Who knows what a fife is? It's a piccolo. He was the musician. And it was that Samuel that ran, not our adult Samuel Pavey. And that sounds more logical. Our Samuel is listed in Margaret Waters' supplement to the DAR Index of Patriots, and as you saw, his stone is intact and quite legible. Grovelawn. Grovelawn Cemetery, some of you may know this cemetery as Pendleton Cemetery or Falls Cemetery. If you're going south on Martin Luther King Boulevard into Pendleton, this is the road that divides that cemetery in half. The oldest section is pictured here. It'll be on your left and in the middle. Other stones from the turn of the century, late 1800s, 1900s, will be extending out from this middle section. There are 4 Revolutionary vets, we think, buried at Grovelawn. 3 of them are probably buried somewhere on the east side in this oldest section, and the 4th is over in the military section on the west side. Elisha Boston, born in Maryland, successful in the mercantile business there. Mercantile is merchandise, so he operated a general store. At the beginning of the fighting, he enlisted and eventually became an officer, according to family sources. His service is recorded in Margaret Waters' DAR supplement. The Boston family, with Elijah and brother Jesse, settled near Pendleton in the early 1830s. Elijah can be found in records as owning land in Section 9 of the township. The Boston family marker is marked by Brother Jesse's pretty Victorian pillar shown here. Elijah died around 1842. He is either buried near or somewhere around probably the Boston family section. Phillip Hobaugh is also buried somewhere, we think, on the east side of Grovelon in the oldest section. Philip was born around 1763 in Germany, according to descendants. He served in Pennsylvania's militia. He fought at Gulford and Utah Springs. He mustered out at Fort Pitt in 1783. I find that interesting because Fort Pitt back then was wilderness area. And of course, Fort Pitt is Pittsburgh. They got the Steelers now. But back then, they had wilderness, and Fort Pitt was important because that's where the Allegheny and the Monongahela joined together to form, whoosh, the Ohio River. And that Fort Pitt was the jumping off spot for anyone coming from the east and going into the Northwest Territory. They usually bought or built huge rafts and put everything on there. That was one way. And then floated down the Ohio, looking out for Indians, and being attacked. And, well, I think we're in Ohio somewhere. Let's jump off here, as many families did. By 1804, Philip and his wife Christine and children Molly, Michael, Elizabeth, Susanna, and Peter were in Ohio. The Hobaugh family is recorded on the 1830 census for our county, though. I find Philip interesting because he was born in Germany, came over here, and began fighting for his adopted country. Additionally, Philip was on the 1825 jury that tried the white settlers who massacred the innocent Native Americans. That jury found those white people guilty of murder. Those whites were hung. The Native American leaders were allowed to witness this. It's the only time in the 19th century that white people were held strictly accountable for how they treated the Native Americans by law. And it happened right here in Madison County. It's one of those important landmark cases in American jurisprudence right here. Some of you may know the story as the Fall Creek Massacre by Jessamine West. Yeah. William Wall is another one, buried probably somewhere in the oldest section of Crosley Cemetery. He was born in Virginia, 1758, served in Taylor's Regiment. William's military service is documented in the DAR Index. William's wife was Nancy Elkins. Their two known children were John and Martha Ellen. John, the son, would later own property in the Pendleton area. A stone pillar also marks their family plot. William Wall applied for his pension in 1831. He died in 1835. Nathaniel Richmond is the one who isn't buried in the oldest section. He is truly buried in the military section on the west side of Grovelon, under the flag. We know he's buried there because the family had him moved in the early 1900s. When this part of the cemetery was being formed, they were having a big Founders Day for Fall Creek and Pendleton, and as part of the ceremonies, they were dedicating Thomas Pendleton's large stone memorial there under the flag. And Nathaniel Richmond was also included because he was a Revolutionary vet, and his DAR marker is in front of Thomas Pendleton's here. And of course, the military section is on the far west side of the west section of Grovelon. Nathaniel was born in Bristol, Massachusetts, 1763. He enlisted when he was 16, served until he was 20 as a member of that state's 2nd Regiment. He saw action at the Battle of Valentine Hill and White Plains. Get this, his discharge signed by George Washington. I mean, if you're going to have connections. Yeah. And of course, he is listed in the DAR Index of Patriots. The cross with the circle in the corner on his meant that he was a reverend, or that he participated as a chaplain at some point. Nathaniel married Susanna Lambert in 1783 in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. Migrating with others to settle the Northwest Territory, Nathaniel is first recorded in Dearborn County, 1818, then in Fayette County, 1821. Sometime in the next several years, the Richmond family found their way to Pendleton, decided to put down roots. Several of his children are listed in the records for Fall Creek Township. Nathaniel died September 1829. His widow is recorded on the census a decade later. We're going to move into the center of the county, and on the west side, we have in Jackson Township, the Robinette Cemetery. And we have a controversy at this cemetery. The Robinette is one of those graveyards you've got to know where it is before you can find it. It is west of County Road 550 West and south of Cross Street. Okay. But 550 West, it's narrow, it looks like a driveway. And there's even a house at the end of it. Long, curving lane. Pretty, but it looks like a driveway, so you got to be close and look for those road signs. You go down the driveway, and where you stop, you'll see a dense woods with a fence and a gate to your right or west. On the other side of the gate is a dirt path. You got to take the dirt path several hundred yards into the woods. And you'll find you're on a hill along White River, and the cemetery is in a cleared space, surrounded by dense trees, undergrowth, and a few new homes now. This cemetery is still being used by the Robinette family, and the township trustee oversees it. The controversy centers around one of the Revolutionary soldiers buried here, Clem Ewell Robinette. The Robinette family says Clem Ewell is a misspelling of ancestor E. Lemuel's name, and E. Lemuel fought in the War of 1812. The American Legion says no, Clem Ewell and E. Lemuel are both here, and Clem Ewell is buried in grave 4, row 3, lot 2, and he fought in the Revolution. This is E. Lemuel's stone. He did fight in the War of 1812. You can see his dates there, 1788, 1849. He and the family came to Jackson Township, north bank of White River. He purchased part of Section 31 in 1837, and perhaps his father or uncle was with him when he came. Reuben Miller, no problem here. Definitely Revolutionary vet. And we know exactly where he was buried, in the cemetery. His grave is the broken stone in front. This is in the southwest corner of the Robinette, and we're looking east, and the stones in the background are Robinette stones. The top half of this stone is broken off. We don't know where it is. Of course, that's the half that had all of the information. Reuben was one of the pioneers to Jackson Township. His wife Jane and son Reuben Jr. were with him. The family recorded on Jackson Township transfer records. Reuben died in 1836 at 70 years of age. But he is one, we know exactly where he's buried. One of 2 or 3 only. If we go a little further north and to the east, we find the Holson Cemetery in Richland Township. It's one of the cutest little Victorian cemeteries. It's on 140 east between 700 north and 800 north. Like Captain Litchfield, buried here in an unmarked grave, we don't know when Perry Swindell was born or when he died, but according to Davis, he was buried in the southwest corner of the Holson. Perry was a native of North Carolina and served from that state. He's recorded in Margaret Waters' book, DAR supplement. Perry lived near the border between Richland and Monroe townships and may have had the nickname of Parky, as pictured here. An American flag is often set next to or in front of John Swindell's monument in honor of his father, Perry. Going further north and back to the west, we have the Mount Tabor Cemetery in Monroe Township. It is on County Road 1300 North, west of State Road 9, and that's north of Alexandria. So it's right on the road. It's one of those you can easily get to, and you can't miss it. It's still being utilized by family and area residents and is overseen by the township trustee. Thankfully now, there is no controversy over which Jonathan Noble is buried at this graveyard. Our Jonathan Noble was born in Maryland, 1764. He is one of the several Jonathan Nobles listed in the DAR Index of Patriots. He served in Worcester, Maryland's regiment. He, his wife Jane, and family found their way to Madison County in the 1830s. They settled near the border of Boone and Monroe townships. The family were members of the Mount Tabor Methodist Church. Jonathan Noble died in 1844 at 80 years of age. He has descendants living in the area. It was the wife of one of Jonathan's descendants and a member of our local DAR chapter that found the records needed to reinstate this veteran with the DAR. And so Jonathan, I think, will be receiving eventually a DAR memorial plaque. It's in the works, kind of a thing. His grave was once a tall, tapering tablet-type marker, and at some point it has broken and is now in 3 sections, and that's what you see there, the 3 sections kind of piled up on top of the foundation. But he is one, we know where he's buried. His stone, though, is broken. But we know Jonathan Noble is at the Mount Tabor. If you want to visit a Revolutionary grave site with original stone at the original burial location and the stone is still intact and quite legible, then you have to go to the old Vincent Cemetery just south of Summitville. And it is right on County Road 100 East. So again, it's huge, huge new sections, and you can't miss it. The old section, though, is at the extreme north and way in the back on top of a hill like you see here. You have to drive through the new section. You have to park next to the sign, and that will allow you to walk up the hill. Most of the stones in the old section face west because the original access was the Fort Wayne Trace. And that's, see the line of trees and the distant background there all across the back? That's what those trees are marking. They border the Fort Wayne Trace. In fact, if you get on the other side of those trees and look down, there's a gully, and there's like a ditch, a wide ditch. And that's the last part, one of the last sections of the Fort Wayne Trace possibly visible. The rest of it's been churned up in the fields. Okay? All of the stones in the old section face west, and that's where this picture is taken from. I'm standing at the top of the hill, looking back in the east. You can see the new driveway in black, the new stones way in the background. I think that's my Lincoln over there on the right-hand side. All of the stones that are new face east. All of the stones on the old section face west. You have a couple of Vincent stones there. It's not a hard hill to climb, and it is well worth the effort because there are some really neat gravestones back there. Now that the new sections of the Vincent Cemetery have been installed and all of those stones face east, the old stones, it looks like they have their backs turned on the new generation. Yeah. But it's well worth the effort. Many moons ago, when the Anderson Herald Bulletin wanted to take pictures of for an article I was doing on the Revolutionary vets buried here, they asked me to tell them where they could get a picture of a burial site. So I took them to Willis Wendell's. His is one of the oldest stones facing west in that old section. Willis served in North Carolina's militia in the latter years of the Revolutionary War. His service is recorded in the supplement to the DAR Index of Patriots. He was born in Hyde County, North Carolina, in 1763, so he was quite young when he served. His father, Josiah, also served, and that's maybe why Willis was there, because his dad was there. He moved first to Wayne County, Indiana, then to Henry County, and later to Van Buren Township in Madison County. Willis lived to be 88 years old. He died in 1851, was survived by his sons Ashley and Allen. And Willis is the only Revolutionary veteran with an original stone at his original burial location. The stone is still intact, and as you can see, quite legible. So if you want to go see one, this would be the one to go see. Here's our map again. Andrew Jackson is buried on the south boundary, the red bottom line, in a private cemetery. We no longer know where it is. Minden Cemetery, a little further north, has John Mingle. Over to the left, west of Pendleton, the Crosley Cemetery has Samuel Pavey. Just north of Pendleton, in Pendleton actually, Grovelon has 4 altogether: Elijah Boston, Phillip Hobaugh, William Wall, in the old section somewhere, Nathaniel Richmond across the road in the military section of Grovelon. Going into the middle of the county, off to the west or left, the Robinette Cemetery has 2, Reuben Miller and Clem Ewell Robinette. Going to the east or right, we have the Otterbein in Chesterfield with Henry Russell, Captain Litchfield. Going further north on 700 North, the Holson Cemetery has Perry Swindell. North of Alexandria on the left or west, the Star Cemetery or Mount Tabor has Jonathan Noble. And lastly, just south of Summitville on County Road 100 East is the Vincent Cemetery with Willis Wendell. Those are our 14 Revolutionary vets as researched by Margaret Waters and Raymond Davis. We started with Henry Russell at the Otterbein. For the dedication ceremonies for Henry's DAR plaque, historian Edward Ronsheim made this point: only by preserving history are we fit to make it. These people braved the dangers of the frontier to establish that which we enjoy. Surely they earn from us a right to believe that the stones which mark their lives and death will be held as a sacred trust and historical tie between the past, today, and the future. If you'd like to see the pictures again, if you'd like to review the Revolutionary figures, our Cemetery Commission's website, Pioneer Cemeteries and Their Stories, Madison County, Indiana. There's the website address, or if you want to make it easy on yourself, you go to the Madison County Historical Society website and they have a link to the cemetery website. There's a photo gallery. Go in there and the Revolutionary veterans have their own photo gallery. Each of them listed with pictures, and the information presented to you tonight is also there.